proud of Rand, the physician, Rand, the U.S. Senator, but most of all, Rand, the amazing husband and father that he is. So with that, I'd like to introduce you all to my husband, Rand Paul.
Thank you. The other day at the debate, one of the best moments was somebody stood up, and he's a supporter of ours that we met with the other day, and he stood up all by himself, and you could hear him clear as a bell throughout the whole stadium. I stand with Rand. And the whole crowd heard him, and you could see the box anchors also. Where are these people? We made the decision, instead of giving our tickets to the rich donors, we gave them to college students. And they were all loud, and they were boisterous, and it made it a lot more exciting, and it helped to energize us all. I travel, unfortunately, all the time on a meeting in airports and eating barbecues and you name it. So I was at a barbecue not too long ago, and I was in Paducah, Kentucky, and they were serving barbecue. And the guy in front of me had like 2 plates of food, and I'm like, I don't live very long eating like that. He said, well, my granddad lived to be 105. I said, well, your granddad didn't live to be 105 eating like that. And he said, nope, he lived to be 105, but minding his own business. I kind of want a government that minds its own business. Our government has gotten too large and involved in every nook and cranny of our lives. We have 48 federal agencies that have SWAT teams. I'm not making this up. The USDA has a SWAT team. The USDA has done such things that are so important to you as taking down an Amish farmer before sunlight because he was selling milk from the cow. I told this story to my father-in-law. He said, well, I grew up drinking milk directly from the cow for 18 years, and the only problem we ever had was when the cow got into the onions. But we have a government that just thinks they need to take care of us from cradle to grave. We've got this billionaire up in New York. Well, now we have 2 billionaires from New York, but Bloomberg says he wants to run because he wants to make sure you don't drink more than 16 ounces of soda in one sentence. No big gulps coming from Manny Bloomberg. But the thing is I don't think we need a government involved in every nook and cranny of our lives. Our founding fathers didn't want that. We have an EPA now, and this is coming from royal edict from President Obama, that 97% of the farmland in Iowa will be under federal control. How did he do this? Did he pass it through Congress? No, he can't get anything through Congress, so he's frustrated. What does the president say? He's got his pen, he's got his phone, and by golly, he's going to do whatever he wants. That doesn't sound like a president to me. That sounds sort of like a third world autocrat. We should be doing everything possible to stop this man from ruining the country. And yet, what happens? Your representatives came here and they said, give us the House and we'll stop him. Give us the Senate and we'll stop him. We'll use the power of the purse. What are they doing? They've given away the farm. All the regulations that he's writing, he's doing by executive order. But we're not trying to stop him. On day one, I'll repeal every one of those executive orders. The EPA has a SWAT team. So realize when they tell you that your farm is a wetland or your backyard is a wetland, they will send the police, the armed federal police, to police you, to handcuff you, to put you in jail if you don't obey the rules. You think I'm exaggerating? Ask Robert Lucas. Robert Lucas spent 10 years in prison. What was his crime? He lived in southern Mississippi, and he decided to develop a real estate development. His daughter worked for him. She was a part-time nurse. She also was convicted under the RICO statute, conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act. And you say, well, people shouldn't pollute. We should keep our water clean. I agree. The Clean Water Act, I would have voted for. It says you cannot discharge pollutants into a navigable stream. You shouldn't be allowed to dump benzene in the Des Moines River, the Ohio River, the Mississippi River. But how did somewhere along the line, over 40 years, the Clean Water Act morphed into that dirt is a pollutant and your backyard is a navigable stream. How did your backyard become a navigable stream? By executive order, unfortunately under a Republican president, the first George Bush. But they redefined navigable streams to mean anything. In fact, they have a rule called the migratory bird rule. You know what that means? If a bird could have landed on the Great Lakes and might be making a pit stop in your backyard, that's a nexus. You are now connected to the Great Lakes. You are part of the greater water systems of the federal government controls, and your backyard can be regulated. So Robert Lucas put clean dirt on his own land to improve the elevation. Was there any standing water there before he started putting dirt on it? No. It was uplands with woods. Did it occasionally get water on it when it rained hard? Maybe. But they can define a wetlands by 600 different plants that they can find. They can drill for soil samples if they can find water in the soil. If they can find leaves that if you flip them over are blackened on the bottom, that land might be a wetland. He was convicted of conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act, and he spent 10 years in prison. He just got out recently. He was put in prison at 70. There was another man in Morristown who was a Hungarian immigrant, and the lot across from him, and this is a crummy commercial road with land that nobody was doing. It was a junkyard. There were hundreds of old rusted out automobiles. There were 7,000 tires. One of the side effects of the tires was that they were blocking the drainage ditch, so it did flood. He did what he thought was a service. He should have gotten a medal. He cleaned up all the old junky automobiles, picked up 7,000 tires, and it didn't flood anymore because he improved the ditches. He began adding dirt. What did we do? He got 3 years in prison, $250,000 fine, bankrupted him, and ruined his life. This is what happened when you let your government get out of control. The wetlands rules that all came from a Republican. So you have to ask yourself, if you want to change directions, do you want more of the same? Do you want to elect Republicans that have allowed government to get bigger and bigger? That's a real question. If and when I am president, we are going to change the direction of this country. We are going to give the power back to the states and the people. I decided to run for office because I was unhappy about the debt and worried that the debt was going to consume us as a country. We borrow $1 million a minute. Whose fault do you think it is? Democrats? President Obama? Republicans? Both parties are at fault. That's the real rub. That's what everybody needs to understand in this. And there's only one person on the stage willing to admit that both parties are at fault. The loudest voices in Washington for increased spending right now are Republican voices. Why? They say they want to increase military spending. Listen to them. Rubio wants to increase military spending $1 trillion. Where's it going to come from? We're going to have to borrow money from China to put $1 trillion into our military. But will that make us stronger? I don't think we project strength from bankruptcy court. In fact, I think the further we go into debt, the weaker we are. In fact, I think the number one threat to our national security is our debt. And so the right is clamoring, and they want more money for military. How do they get it? They have to give the left what they want. The left wants to expand the welfare state. The only way the right can get military spending is to give the left the welfare spending, and everything rises, and you're stuck with the bill. This just happened. Paul Ryan, Patty Murray got together in 2013 and increased spending $80 billion. They did it again this fall when they raised the debt ceiling. Do you know how much we raised the debt ceiling? Trillion? Trillion and a half? No, infinity. We raised the debt ceiling an unlimited amount. At the same time, we increased the budget parameters for military and domestic spending. When the Tea Party was first elected, when I went in 2010, we did the opposite. We lowered the caps on spending for both. But since then, we've been retreating and retreating and retreating. We are not exercising the power of the purse, and it's getting worse, and both parties are at fault. And so you might say, well, we've got to have a strong military. Rubio's right, we need more money. So Rubio and Cruz introduced an amendment to increase military spending by $200 billion. And I said, well, if you think we need that, why don't we cut spending elsewhere to pay for it? So I introduced a competing amendment. Theirs would increase military spending $200 billion with no offsetting cuts. I introduced the same $200 billion increase, but I cut $200 billion worth of spending to pay for it. Nobody, hardly anybody, voted for my amendment. Everybody voted for the Cruz and Rubio amendment, but that's going to bankrupt us. It's not going to make us stronger. And you say, well, we've got to have more money for the military. Maybe not. We spend $600 billion on the military right now. How much is that? It's as much as Russia, plus China, plus 8 more countries. We spend on our military as much as the next 10 countries combined. Maybe we just need to spend it more wisely. I'm a big fan of Reagan, big fan of Reagan's first Navy Secretary, his youngest Navy Secretary in our history, John Lehman. He says we need to have more ships, expand and modernize our Navy. But you know how he says we should pay for it? Cut out the bureaucracy in the Pentagon. You know what? I'm a huge fan of auditing the Fed, but you know what we really need to do also? Audit the Pentagon. Last year we spent $43 million from our military budget building a natural gas station in Afghanistan. First problem, most people in Afghanistan don't have cars. Second problem, no one in Afghanistan has a natural gas burning car. What are we doing that for? Because President Obama wants to make the world green. So he's going to lead with having a green military in Afghanistan. That gas station should have cost $500,000. That's the estimated cost of building that gas station. Cost $43 million. Someone ought to go to jail for that. And when you think about that money being wasted, think about our soldiers, think about the fact that we have veterans on food stamps. All right? We have homeless veterans, and we're spending $43 million in another country on something we have no business spending on it. When I'm president, I'm going to take care of America first and not send your money overseas. There's been some discussion of foreign policy, and there needs to be more. We need to decide as a people whether or not making the sand glow or carpet bombing the Middle East will make us safer. We toppled Saddam Hussein. Are we safer today because of it? We spent $1 trillion. We lost 5,000 young men and women. Some of our bravest young men and women were lost in the Iraq War. How did Iraq repay us for liberating them? They became allies with Iran and Russia. They basically spit in our face. We have a Shiite government now in Baghdad that is feckless and has allowed most of that land to be lost back to ISIS. I don't think we're safer. I think Iran is more of a menace with Saddam Hussein gone. I think if there's one thing we should learn from the Middle East, it's that when we've toppled secular dictators, we've gotten chaos and actually the rise of radical Islam. Look at Libya. Everybody wanted to get rid of Gaddafi. Hillary Clinton did. Barack Obama did. Rubio, Christie, the whole works. Bush, all of them. They wanted to get rid of Gaddafi. So we did. What did we get? Chaos. Our ambassador was assassinated. The jihadists swim in our embassy swimming pool in Tripoli. There is no government in Libya. They now say that 1/3 of Libya pledges allegiance to ISIS. Well, maybe it wasn't a good idea to topple Gaddafi. It's now a breeding ground for terrorists who will someday come and attack us. But how did this happen? Because you have people who have this naive notion that we're going to make the world safe for democracy. We're going to recreate the world in our own image. We're going to topple Gaddafi, and maybe they'll elect Thomas Jefferson. Maybe not. Maybe they're going to elect radical Islam, or radical Islam is going to fill the void over there. Why is this important? Some of the commentators will say, well, that's all history. What are you going to do now? Well, it's important because now there are people who want to bomb both sides of the war. There are people who want to bomb ISIS and Assad at the same time. Who are these people? Let's just call them John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio. There is a war going on within our party. There is a debate, a healthy debate about what we should do in the Middle East. I think we have to defend ourselves. I want a national defense strong enough to deter all attacks, to repel all attacks, but I don't want a foreign policy that believes that we can pick the right leaders throughout the Middle East and that somehow we're going to get it right when we've gotten it wrong so much of the time. I want a foreign policy that defends America, that makes us strong again, but I don't want a foreign policy that thinks that regime change in the Middle East is going to work. It has not worked in the past, and what we need to do is, absolutely without question, let's quit arming our enemies. There is a debate in our party about how we're going to win again. People think this is all about the primary. No, this ought to be about the fall. I don't want to remind you, and I don't want to blame each and every one of you, but you elected Barack Obama twice from Iowa. Okay, it's not all of your fault. Probably there aren't that many in the room who voted for Barack Obama, but Iowa voted for him twice, so we have to figure out how to win Iowa. And the real question is, how do we win again? I think we need to be a bigger, better, bolder party. I think we need to be boldly for what we are for. In fact, I think we need to be more boldly for what we're for. I'd cut the entire tax code and replace it with one rate, 14.5% for everybody. Fill your taxes up. Let's don't beat around the bush and just say, oh, we're going to do revenue neutral tax reform as long as no one gets a tax cut. Let's make it a tax cut. Let's return the money to the people and stimulate the economy. Be more boldly for the principles we are as Republicans. But is that enough? Is there enough out there just to say, oh, we're going to rally the base and that we're going to win again? No, you've got to have new people. And you can look around the room and you'll see new faces that we're bringing into the party. Young people who we say, you know what? The government's got no business collecting your cell phone. When I'm president, we're not collecting your cell phone records. Only those for whom we have a warrant, for those who we have a suspicion. We're going to end bulk collection of phone records. I think we also need to look at those who have not been looking to the Republican Party, those who live in poverty, those who are out of work, and those who have been caught up in the war on drugs. The war on drugs has devastated our minority communities. When you think about it, when you look at the statistics, it's amazing. White kids, black kids use drugs at about the same rate. But you know who's been caught up by the war on drugs? Poor kids and primarily African American kids. Think about it. The white population is like 80% of the public. Black population is about 12%. They use drugs at the same rate. But the jails, 3 out of 4 people in jail are black or brown. If we don't understand this and understand where the anger's coming and just say, oh, that's those other people, we're never going to be able to say, you know what, there's a place for you in our party. We're so distrustful of big government when it comes to regulations and taxes, justifiably so, but we need to be distrustful of big government and the criminal justice system. You know, think about it. I don't know if you saw the other day when Peyton Manning gave Demaryius Thomas the football for his mom. Demaryius Thomas's mom has been in jail for 15 years. And I'm not justifying what she did. She sold drugs. But at the same time, 15 years? In Kentucky, you can kill someone and be eligible for parole in 12 years. His grandmother's still in prison. She will not be eligible for parole for 40 years. And once again, I'm not justifying what they did, but we've gathered up a whole community. I went to Ferguson. In Ferguson, for every 100 black women, there's only 60 black men. When I've been to the black community, and Iowa doesn't have a large black community, but when I visited in the black community in Iowa, almost to a time, people have come up and said, I can't get a job in a corporation because I have a record of something I did when I was 21 years old. We need to understand where the anger is coming from. We need to understand big government hasn't done a good job with this. And ultimately, you know what? I think drugs are a scourge. But I think we need to treat drugs as a health problem and not as an incarceration problem. As we go forward, Monday's around the corner, as we decide to caucus, if you think this message, which is admittedly a different message, if you think this is the message of how we'll win again and how we'll change the country and get the country back, talk to your family, get your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, drag them to the caucuses. Probably going to be a snowstorm, so get their snowshoes on and their coat and their hat. Drag them to the caucuses. We can win. I think the polls are way off, and I think we're going to shock a lot of people if you'll turn out, if you'll bring your family members with you. The message we need to take, and the message that we're trying to carry across the country, is one of hope and optimism. When I think of the outlook that we have to have and the outlook that will attract new people to our party, it isn't one of anger. It isn't one of saying, oh, these other people are all bad people, and these people who have different color skin, we need to get rid of these people, we need to exclude these people. It needs to be hope and optimism for everybody. When I think of the hope and optimism that we need to spread, and I think there's a painter by the name of Robert Henry, and he said as an exhortation to young painters, he said, paint like a man coming over the hill singing. I like that image. We need to proclaim with passion, with the passion of Patrick Henry in our defense of civil liberties and the Bill of Rights. We also need to proclaim our message as a party with the hope and optimism of a man coming over the hill singing. When we do, we're going to rock and roll to victory. I want to be part of that, and I hope you do too. Thank you very much.